Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching WBT area. Coming up next, a special program on School Funding 2009, featuring President of the Board of Education, Mr. Jeffrey Stewart.
Hello, I'm Jeff Stewart, President of the West Bloomfield Board of Education. As you know, the state of Michigan is facing an unprecedented budget crisis, and school funding has been hit as hard as any other sector of the state budget. This is not surprising, since school funding represents 38% of total state outlays. People are asking questions all over the state about school funding and why we're in the situation that we're in. Let's look at some of those questions and see if we can provide answers that will help you as voters determine what you want from the state and what you can do to contact your legislators.
I thought our property tax would pay for our schools. Property taxes have not gone down much, even with a drop in residential home values. Why is it that the schools are in financial problems?
The answer to that question lies in understanding the enormous change that took place in school finance in 1994 with the passage of a constitutional amendment called Prop A. Prior to that time, almost all school funding came from local property taxes, which meant, among other things, that local communities were in control of the amount of money that they raised and spent on their schools. But in 1994, largely to reduce property taxes that were thought to be putting enormous pressure on people with fixed incomes, the entire system changed. Now almost all funding comes from the sales tax and other general revenues at the state level. But the downside of that is that the state is in almost total control of our funding. And when state resources fall, as they have now, so does funding for schools. And there's not a thing that we can do about it locally. If we were able to put an issue on the ballot for an increase in the tax rate, it would only result in the state putting in that much less money at their level. Consequently, we have to ride with what the state provides, one way or the other.
What about the state lottery? I thought that was supposed to supplement the school budget.
The state lottery is one of the great myths of education funding. The fact of the matter is that when the lottery was passed, it was intended to be a supplement to education and to be put in on top of the general appropriation from the state legislature. But there was no law that prevented the legislature from actually reducing the general appropriation to match funds coming in from the lottery. And that's exactly what has happened. As a consequence, the lottery only represents about 5.7% of all of the money that's spent on education. And when lottery revenues go up, the legislature is free to reduce the general appropriation accordingly, and they do.
Are all Michigan schools facing the same problems that we are?
All Michigan schools are facing the same problems that we are, but some are in more trouble than others. The big difference between school districts that are up against the wall now and those who will be shortly has to do with how big a savings account they had before the crisis started. In West Bloomfield, our approach was always to get as much money into the classroom and into educational improvements as possible. And so our piggy bank was smaller than some surrounding districts. As a consequence, we're feeling the pressure more than many districts around us, but far less than some in the state that are already in serious structural deficit.
Can we put an operating millage on the ballot to increase funding for the schools?
As we noted a few moments ago, we are not permitted by law to put an operating millage on the ballot to increase funding to schools. And if we did, the legislature would simply take the money back from its own appropriation. The irony of Michigan school finance is that we are permitted to put bond issues on the ballot to pay for infrastructure, additional equipment in the schools, repairs to major capital items. And that has taken some pressure off our local budget. But in terms of directly funding the operation of the schools, we cannot by law do anything about that. We are at the mercy of the state.
We just passed a bond renewal. What happened to that money?
The bond issue that was recently passed was predicated upon a promise that we made to the voters that we would not allow the millage rate for the payment of that bond to be increased over the level that has been in place historically. The trouble is that with the decline in property values that's occurred over the last year, that millage rate has to go up slightly just to pay existing bonds.
Would we have been better off if we had not gone to school of choice in the first place? Could we have closed schools?
Schools of choice, although it has been controversial in West Bloomfield, has been a godsend for us financially. The fundamental principle behind schools of choice is that, as in every sector of an industrial economy, the greater numbers you can deal with at the same fixed costs, the better off you are. So just as GM and Ford make more money when they sell more cars, our revenue from the state increases every time we add a student to the rolls, whether it's a choice student or a local student. But our fixed costs don't go up that much. Consequently, having more students in schools has generated millions of dollars in additional revenue that we would not have had any other way. We see schools of choice as having been not only an addition to the budget, but the savior of our budget.
If we end the Schools of Choice program now, will that help us in the long run, even if it hurts in the beginning?
Ending schools of choice now would be a disaster for the West Bloomfield School District. We bring in millions of dollars through schools of choice that would not be replaced any other way. And even if we took all of these schools of choice students out of the schools, we would not be able to close those buildings because we would still have more children in each building than we can fit into the remaining schools if we started to close them. Consequently, we are committed to choice for the foreseeable future and need to embrace it for the godsend that it has been.
What are all the employees doing to negotiate benefits and wages in face of all these budget problems?
Our employees have already given back to the district. Last year, they agreed to what's known as a step freeze that saved the school district $1.2 million. There have also been voluntary modifications in the benefit plans that have saved nearly another $1 million. We're in negotiation with all of our employee groups to obtain additional wage and benefit concessions that will help school district to survive. These will be essential, but we have faith that our employees will work with us in order to keep this school district functioning in the face of the severe budget crisis.
What happens when we run out of money? Do the schools shut down?
The West Bloomfield schools are not going to shut down no matter what happens to our budget. State law provides that if we go into true deficit, which we will by June of this coming year, we're required to submit what is called a deficit reduction plan and demonstrate to the state how we're going to come back into balance. We will do that, and schools will continue to function.
What can I do to help?
The most important thing that people can do is to contact their legislators and let them know that it's no longer acceptable for West Bloomfield and Oakland County generally to be contributing far more to the state budget for education than we get back for our local schools. And you can also contribute generously to the West Bloomfield Education Foundation to directly supplement our program and keep the program as strong as possible during these difficult times. You can contact your state senator, Nancy Cassis, at 517-373-1758. Her email is sennccassis@senate.michigan.gov. Your representative is Lisa Brown. You can contact her at 517-373-1799. Her email is lisabrown@house.mi.gov. Representative Gail Haynes can be reached at 517-373-0615. Her email is gailhaines@house.mi.gov.